Good morning, evening, and afternoon. I am the Professional, and in today's video, we are going to be covering everything about the new class in Lost Ark, the Glavier, or as I'm going to refer to it, the Lance Master. We are going to cover the general information about the class, its attacks, its stances, its builds, its engravings, literally everything that you need to know in order to maximize this class's potential. So let's get started. The Lance Master is a part of the martial artist profession and only available as a female character. The Lance Master, just like its name implies, utilizes two spears, one long-range spear and one short-range spear. Now, you don't use both spears at the same time. This is not a dual-wielding class. You will only use one spear at a time, and the spear you are using is dependent on what stance you are currently in. The Lance Master has two stances, the Focus and the Flurry. The Focus stance is also referred to as the Sun and or Red stance, which has your burst damage abilities. The Flurry stance is also referred to as the Moon or Blue stance, and this has most of your abilities for consistent damage. I will cover each of their abilities later on. The Lance Master can switch stances whenever they want by pressing the Z button. However, you do not want to just switch for no reason, as you need to build your dual meter in order to obtain buffs. Your dual meter has 3 levels and is built by using attacks and abilities. Each level contains a buff depending on which stance you are in, but that buff doesn't become active until you switch stances. So ideally, you want to build your dual meter to level 3, which will maximize your buffs, and then switch to your next stance to activate that buff. The stance buffs will last for about 10 seconds or a little longer. So let's cover the buffs you obtain as you fill your dual meter. When you are swapping from the Flurry stance to the Focus stance, the level 1 buff is a 5% move speed buff, the level 2 is a 10% move speed buff and a 10% damage bonus, and level 3 is a 15% move speed, 10% damage, and a 25% crit damage bonus. When you are swapping from the Focus to the Flurry stance, the level 1 buff is a 10% attack speed bonus, the level 2 is a 10% attack speed bonus and a 10% damage bonus, and level 3 is a 10% attack speed bonus, 10% damage bonus, and a 15% crit chance bonus. The Lance Master has 2 class engravings, Pinnacle and Control. The Control engraving makes the class easier to play, as this disables the Focus stance and increases the damage of your Flurry skills. So level 1 will provide a 18% damage increase, level 2 provides a 27% damage increase, and level 3 provides a 36% damage increase. This is referring to your dual meter levels. The Pinnacle engraving is heavily dependent on your specialization stat, as it increases your overall stat increase with each dual level. Higher spec means stronger buffs when you switch stances. The Pinnacle engraving is a more difficult but higher ceiling build, as it requires you to constantly switch between your stances in order to maintain your buffs. Overall, the Lance Master is a very flashy class that has 2 different playstyles. So now let's jump into the abilities. Let's start with the Flurry abilities. Lost Ark does help you distinguish which skills are for which stance just by their color. Flurry abilities are blue and the Focus abilities are red, as is tradition. Now let's cover your main Focus abilities. Starfall Pounce and Red Dragon's Horn are your 2 big damage abilities. Starfall Pounce is a movement and area attack that will launch enemies up. Red Dragon's Horn is a charge and release ability. Spiraling Spear is a high identity attack. Dragon Scale Defense is a defensive ability that will block incoming damage by a percentage. Four-Headed Dragon is a flurry of 8 strikes before one final thrust. Thrust of Destruction is a charged ability that hits one enemy in front of you and then shoots a beam through all enemies straight ahead. Now let's jump into your main Flurry abilities. Raging Dragon Slash is one of your main stagger skills and is also an AoE. Half Moon Slash is a mid-stagger skill with level 2 destruction. Wheel of Blades is another good damage skill that can be used twice in a row with the appropriate tripod. Shackling Blue Dragon is your team buff skill that lowers crit resistance on your enemy by 10%. Chain Slash is one of your main movement skills. Flash Kick is your second movement skill, and Vault is your main counter skill. Cutting Wind is another less impactful movement skill as it can be used for avoiding attacks. The Lancemaster has 2 awakening abilities. The first is the Spear Meteor, which is an easier to use awakening due to its attack area. The Storming Red Dragon awakening is harder to consistently land as it performs multiple strikes over a brief period, meaning high movement bosses could easily avoid part of the damage. So now that we know the abilities, let's go over the 2 builds. We will start simple with the Control build. This is a simple build that relies on you staying in the flurry stance throughout the battle. Utilizing this build will buff your Lancemaster, increasing damage by 36% at level 3 dual meter. This is to help compensate for being restricted to only one weapon. Your main stat priority is Swiftness, as it will mainly decrease your skill cooldowns. Since you're limited to 8 skills, you need as little downtime as possible. Aside from Swiftness, you will need to focus on crit, as you are not switching stances and therefore do not have an increased crit chance. The Control build also relies on back attacks in order to maximize damage. The main engravings for this build are Ambush Master, Grudge, Cursed Doll, and Adrenaline or Raid Captain. The second build is the Pinnacle build. This is a much more difficult playstyle and it has a higher skill ceiling. The Pinnacle build will output better DPS than the Control build. This build relies on building your dual meter and then switching once at level 3. Your main stat priority is Specialization, as it increases the buffs that you receive when switching stances. This build is not as heavily reliant on back attacks, as you will have a much higher crit rate chance due to the focus stance switch buff. Your main engravings here are Grudge, Cursed Doll, Keen Blunt Weapon, and Raid Captain. That is pretty much everything you need to know about the Glavier class. It's a pretty flashy class and fun to play. What are your thoughts on the Lancemaster? Are you power passing it or not really bothering with it? Let me know down in the comments below, and don't forget to hit that like button if you enjoyed the video. I appreciate you guys. Happy raiding.